Welcome everybody to another episode of the Red Flex, the only channel in the world run by four brothers who support Manchester United from Manchester. So we have a very special episode tonight. A little bit late, I know, but we've got to show that dedication, that passion for our love for Manchester United. Today we have Harris who is joining us today, and we will be discussing the prospects of a European Premier League. Harris, is the Premier League as we know it, is it done forever? Let's share the information. What is it all about?
So yes, interesting developments over the last 7 days. I think a lot of people have probably read some articles or seen it in the paper. They might not quite understand what's going on. And I've had quite a few of my friends and colleagues ask me over the last few days, what is actually going on? Are you guys going to be doing some sort of segment on this? And I thought, you know what, I think we should, just to explain it in layman terms, just so everybody understands what's going on. And then obviously people can then form their own opinion. So obviously it was leaked a few days ago, just before the PSG game, that Man United Liverpool were in discussions as part of what they're calling Project Big Picture. Basically, this is a FIFA-run league. It'll be basically with a potential of 16 to 18 teams who will play home and away. There'll be 4 or 5 teams from the Premier League. The rest will be made up from the other big nations, so Germany, Spain, Italy, etc. And this will run in conjunction with a normal football season. This is all being backed by Wall Street Bank, JP Morgan, in a 4.6 billion pound kind of fund. So basically, this is a package that they're going to put together. There'll be a big pot at the end. Hence the reason why there's a lot of discussions with all these big boys and why they're so interested, because the prize at the end is going to be massive. The problem with it is there are so many ramifications for both the Champions League, the Premier League, and other sort of competitions if this was obviously to go ahead. It also brings other issues like a potential clash between FIFA and UEFA. FIFA have their competitions, UEFA obviously have the Champions League, so it could all potentially all kind of come to a head. But however, I think there was a emergency meeting with the Premier League clubs last week, and I think this kind of idea, this kind of this notion of the European Premier League got kind of knocked down in there, but it seems as though United, Liverpool, and a few of the other big players in Europe kind of want to still go ahead with this and find some sort of way where they can, try and make this happen. So yeah, that's basically what it is in a nutshell. The problems that would happen is obviously if this was to go ahead, what would happen to the Champions League? In theory, it would have to come to an end, because you couldn't have all these games. You couldn't have a potentially 38 Premier League game season, although obviously as part of this Project Big Picture, they want to reduce the teams to 18, which will obviously mean 2 less games. They want to get rid of the League Cup, and they want to get rid of the Charity Shield. So obviously that'll free up some more kind of dates on the calendar. However, you're still looking at 70 games odd in a season, which obviously is too much, too many games. So something would have to give. If this was to go ahead, this would obviously have an impact on the Premier League. The product itself, the Premier League product, would become, I guess, less of a product in terms of when they're, it being sold all around the world. If you've got teams who no longer have to compete for European places, you don't have that kind of end of season kind of jeopardy on the games, where the games don't really mean much. If United, Liverpool, let's say Chelsea, Arsenal, kind of guaranteed European football every season, then it obviously makes the product of the Premier League not as appealing. And obviously you're also getting rid of the League Cup and Charity Shield, which obviously have their own sponsors, have their own kind of format. So there's a lot of questions would have to be answered if this was to go ahead. The question people are probably going to ask is why are United and Liverpool so kind of eager to get this done? Obviously, they've got American-backed owners. This is the way it works in America with their kind of NFL and other sort of sports. This is the way they kind of do things in terms of how their kind of competitions are structured. So for them, this isn't an alien concept. This is kind of normal for them. It's just another way of bringing in massive revenues. So yeah, for them it's a win-win situation. So yeah, Kasim, I'm not sure what your initial thoughts are on something like that being kind of introduced.
Well, I think you've pretty much you've talked about everything. Thanks for watching, guys, and that's a wrap. Basically, thank you very much for sharing that information, Harris. For me personally, I'm a little bit torn on this. If you were the owners of Manchester United, Liverpool, and the big clubs, you probably sit there in those boardrooms sipping on that coffee thinking, wait a minute, we bring the most eyes to the product, we bring the most money to the product, so why should we not go and better ourselves and get involved with something that's going to bring us even more money? So from a kind of businessman or business side of things, that would probably be the reasons for why the big clubs in England probably want to, entertain this. In terms of football as a whole, obviously clubs lower down the football league already struggling. How that would kind of tie in with everything, I'm not sure. But in terms of the ins and outs, obviously you've already explained. But a question that I would like to ask you then, taking into consideration of how it's kind of tentatively looking at, how do you think Manchester United would actually do in a European Premier League?
Yeah, I know you mentioned it looks very lucrative from a business point of view, but I mean, just looking at it from a purely kind of selfish fans point of view, I mean, you wouldn't mind, would you, having, 1 week playing Barca, then Bayern, then Juve, and all these big boys, it'd be something to look forward to, wouldn't it? Obviously, I think the dates that they mentioned was the start of the 2022-23 season, I think was kind of bandied about. So, it's not actually that too far away if obviously, things were to get in motion. How United would do, I don't know really. I think the format they want is, I think they will have a league and then some sort of kind of playoff system at the end. So you might not necessarily have to finish first or second or third necessarily. Maybe the top 6 out of those 16 to 18 teams would then go on to a kind of like a knockout format, and then you would have a winner. So if that was the case, then obviously I'd have a great chance, just like most of the teams. As if you don't have to finish for first, second, or third, then it's something that they could potentially do well. And obviously, we don't know what the team's going to look like. It's all ifs, buts, and maybes. Obviously, like you'd hope that the United team would kind of evolve from where they are now. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the other English teams, obviously that's the problem, isn't it? If you if the rich teams get richer, then what happens to the rest of the teams? It's just you kind of then have this massive gulf where you'll have 4 or 5 powerhouses in the Premier League, which kind of already do, but we've still got some some other teams up until probably team number 8 or 9, which are kind of teams with good squads. They've got good investment. They can kind of afford players. But obviously, if this was to be introduced, then straight away, you would find that the winners of the Premier League would only come from those 4 or 5 teams every year. So, it's got its problems, it's got its issues. At the minute, as I said, it's been knocked back, but I've got a feeling that this is now going to get pushed every season, simply because of the high numbers that are involved here. If you're looking at 4.6 billion, pounds, obviously it's not going to be that as the prize, but that's covering everything. So it's a lot of money at stake, really, a lot of money.
I mean, at the end of the day, you mentioned something about there's going to be a gulf between the big teams and the small teams is pretty much a reflection of modern society and the world that we live in. There's a gulf between the rich get richer, and that's pretty standard. But that doesn't mean that that's right. In terms of how fair it is, obviously it's probably not going to be fair for the lower teams, but it's something definitely to watch out for. It's quite funny because the first time I read about the European Premier League, it reminded me of my younger self when I used to be buying copies of FIFA every year. And after I went through a bit of a career mode and played online, the first thing that I would do was create this custom league and play these games. And it was entertaining. I mean, like we said before, you're playing Real Madrid, you're playing Bayern Munich, you're playing Juventus. In terms of the broadcasters, who are definitely going to be worried with COVID and the impact of, are they getting value for money for the amount that they do pay. I think Gary Neville mentioned as well that football does need help in terms of governance. There's a lot of things going on that we need to look out for in terms of how can football evolve with time. I think if you look at it in the other sports as well, cricket, for example, you've got the IPL. There's various versions of the IPL. The 100 was supposed to be played this year. I think golf has the race to Dubai. Boxing has these lucrative fights in Saudi Arabia. And you could call it's an attempt to modernize the sport, an attempt to secure its long-term future. Obviously, I think I was 2 years old when the Premier League was formed. There was a lot of political issues behind the scenes from what I read with that. What do you think if we just focus on the reasons to support the idea, what do you think it would bring in terms of for the fans and in terms of the clubs?
Yeah, for the fans, you're looking at some amazing away days, unbelievable away days, Madrid, Barcelona, Amsterdam, just to name a few, it'd be awesome, wouldn't it, from a fan's point of view, knowing that you've got these kind of away days already pre-booked on the calendar. You can kind of plan it in, you can kind of like plan your holidays around it and all that kind of stuff. So from that point of view, I guess it would be good, but it's not just about that. You have to look at the bigger picture, don't you? Here, as in what impact it's going to have on sport here in the UK and kind of like grassroots levels and all that kind of stuff. So all that needs to be kind of ironed out before anything can happen. I think there was an article in the Telegraph. I don't really think much of the editors on there, but I think that's
apologies for any Telegraph viewers that are watching.
Or any fans of them or any relatives, but but there was an interesting one just before the PSG game where I think obviously this news broke, and then I think there was an article saying that PSG and Man United represent those kind of big clubs with big names and big backing, but very little quality to kind of show for it on the pitch. And that's what this European Premier League would become, kind of this like glorified kind of league for all these big boys with the big names, the big punch. But in terms of the actual football itself, not that great. But obviously, I think he had to kind of eat his words a little bit after the way we played in Paris. But yeah, it's just like another interesting point, isn't it? Is it going to be just those top 8-10 teams which are the cream of the cream, and then the rest are just kind of in there by name, really, just to kind of bring in the numbers, bring in the fans, bring in the money. But yeah, interesting concept. As I said, I don't think much is going to happen right now. Obviously, I think it'd be interesting to see what happens in 6 months' time, a year's time. But obviously, because this is not the first time we've heard about European Premier League. I think it's something that might be inevitable, but there's a lot that would need to happen, and I can't see it happening in the next 2 or 3 years anyway.
No, I think that pretty much wraps up our discussion about the European Premier League. But just before we go tonight, the victory versus PSG, has it sunk in yet?
Yeah, I think it's good just to quickly just recap on that, isn't it? I know at the time your emotions are high and you're buzzing and all that kind of stuff, but you still are. I'm still happy. I can, as you said, I can still go on social media and after kind of put my head down, I can look at it, and most of it is praise for Man United and the way we played. Obviously, in terms of the latest news, obviously I think everybody's heard about what it's kind of a little mini bust up or some punctuality issues with Mason Greenwood. It's quite interesting, which is the news which has developed today, that apparently he's not been coming into training on time, and that's the original reason why he was left out of the squads for Newcastle and PSG. Ole has obviously denied that and said he's got a niggle. Don't know what the truth is, but end of the day, I don't really care as long as whenever he does play next, he plays well, and as long as it seems as though he's got his head screwed on, that's the main thing for me.
In other news as well, before we go again quickly, we might have found the real reason why Aaron Wan-Bissaka is being called Spider-Man these days. There was an article online talking about that he's been quite a busy boy in terms of his relationships and fathering secret children with multiple women. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, as long as he plays well for Manchester United, I mean, he can do anything he wants in his personal life. Is that right?
Yeah, it's fine line, isn't it? In the day, these guys are role models. They're kind of looked up to. They have a responsibility playing for Man United. And the whole thing leaked about Mason Greenwood and England duty. It's not a great look, is it? And these other kind of stories that surface around other players in the past. Yeah, I just think it's not just about the football. Obviously, that's important. He plays well, but you do have kind of like responsibilities. These guys get paid a fortune. They have these great lifestyles and etc. etc. So I think there should be some sort of restraint or some sort of leadership and role model type qualities in these guys. It's like if you're doing something, just make sure you do it and it's done in private, or if you are going to do it and it's going to come into the public domain, then act accordingly, guys.
No, that's great. Just before, I think this is the third time now I've said just before we go, but this is just before we go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for everybody who's provided us with feedback over the last few shows. Sorry. We make a vow, we make a promise to everybody that's tuned in that there will be some considerable investment being made for the channel in terms of its sound and production. Hopefully today's show is better than the previous one. And also a big shout out to Manchester Live, who talked about the red flex and what our views was in terms of the formation. So they give us a special shout out as well in one of their forums. So thank you very much for that. Harris, if there's anything else you want to add before we go?
No, just obviously looking forward to the game against Chelsea. Now, obviously, we'll talk about it properly, I think, in tomorrow's show. But yeah, we've got our confidence looking good, and yeah, hopefully let's carry on from where we left off against PSG.
Absolutely. So everybody, we will be back tomorrow for a pre-match review for the game against Chelsea on Saturday. It's going to be a massive game for ourselves in terms of our season. But until then, thank you very much for tuning in. This is the Red Flex. We are the only channel in the world run by four brothers from Manchester. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.